isn't this a lovely way to start? A huge herd of elephants and some zebras. It's me, Trishala, here to guide you through the cameras for the next 45 minutes or so and remind you that we're live and interactive, so please do send through your questions and your comments. I'm having a very chill day, very relaxed, and this is a great way to end it off. It's 4 p.m. here in South Africa, so after the Africam show with all of you, I might go for a walk and just chill. One of the things I've been telling you about over the last couple of weeks is that I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to like get stuck into wildlife again, particularly our African wildlife, and get stuck into the cameras. And recently I have, and I think that contributes to my feeling very relaxed. And I hope that that's what our shows can do for you too, not just our shows, but our cameras. Already we have some hellos coming through. Dear NC says good morning from Seattle. And you've got a nice hot cup of coffee and you're ready for the show. Very nice. I have got a glass of room temperature water. It's still good though. Sorry, we had a bit of a problem with the cam there, but we're now watching a hippo. Looks like a hippo. They always trip me up. There was one time when I saw, well, this is clearly a hippo here at Sarandella, but there was one time that I was at a waterhole and I was so sure I was looking at the nostrils of a hippo because hippos, very much like the one we're watching right now. Hang on, let me just close my door as this very impressive motorcyclist comes past and creates all this noise. I say impressive because that's the only reason they would be doing something like that is because they think it's impressive, right? Anyway, back to the animals. So much like this hippo here, hippos can submerge a lot of their body underwater while still leaving their basically a lot of their senses outside of the water, like their ears and their eyes and their noses. Anyway, sometimes they have their whole back showing like this, and then sometimes they have nothing except the head or just those nostrils poking out. And I was convinced that what I was looking at was a hippo with just its nostrils poking out. It was not. It was a piece of floating elephant dung. So hippos are great at giving me the tricking me. Now this hippo is on its side, which is very cute. So we're seeing the left side of its body here. And it's spraying some dung occasionally. I wouldn't even call that a proper spray. But this looks like the way to rest. Unfortunately, it doesn't leave much available in the way of senses for this hippo. Yes. You can't have your nostrils out, you can't have your ears and your eyes out the way that you're sleeping. Okay, there's one ear and one eye that's available, but I'm not sure how useful that is. Very sweet, though. April Owl says, good morning, everyone, from a warm and sunny Connecticut. You're looking forward to the show with your blueberry... Oh, got that wrong. Your berry muffins and raspberry iced tea. Oh, it sounds delightful, April Owl. Caspid's third ghost, you say, hello, Trish and everyone. Brisk fall air has arrived in Wisconsin. It's such a weird thing, as you go through seasons and you experience that really intense heat during summer, if that's in an area where you live, you cannot imagine what that brisk, chilly air feels like. And then vice versa. When it's very cold, you can't imagine what it's like to be so hot that you can barely cope. And right now it's pretty warm in Johannesburg, and the sound of brisk fall air is very welcoming. And you say that you're enjoying a steamy hot cup of coffee, which is absolutely appropriate for the time, and you're ready for some hot waterhole or waterhole sites to keep you warm. But we'll try our best to keep you warm. Zygote says namaste. Namaste to you too, Zygote. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Bridget McKinney, for also joining us. Asa Negro says, I salute you all with my black coffee. Very nice. Everyone in their coffee. I love to be part of your morning routine. MG Leopard Spot says, good morning, everyone. Nice clear morning in the Day Area. It's going to be a warm one. Bay Area, sorry. That sounds fantastic. And G and Gail, you say good morning. You're visiting on the dry side of the mountains in Washington State. You're here with coffee and a pumpkin muffin. Ooh, it's that time of the year, everybody. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with this hippo, and I think that it's just playing. We can see that there is a bit of poop. Dung, I should say, is the more appropriate word, because as if you can see the ripples around its body, they're not as browny green as the ripples and the water that's lifting up from its backside. So definitely something is happening there, but it's very half-hearted. If I had to put my finger in it, I'd say this hippo is just lazing about and having some fun, which of course they are allowed to do. We just always want to attribute um, a reason to their behaviors, and most of the time there is. But sometimes they can also just chill. Anyway, speaking of large herbivores that like to chill, there's a rhino at Founders. So let's head over and see if we can catch it in time. Oh, yes. Very nice. Oh, look at these little goslings as well. So sweet. The colors of this camera are just, they're always, they always seem to pull me in. It's the clear blue sky and the red soils. Now we're looking at, or we have been looking at some really large animals starting this show, and I think that if we see some elephants, that would really uh, tie up the kind of pachyderm adventure that we've been on for the first 10 minutes of the show. And it reminded me of something that I wanted to tell you about a couple weeks back. And it has a lot to do with mega herbivores. And since we had a hippo, we had a rhino, and I'm sure we're going to, oh, we had some elephants already, but I'm sure we'd see some more elephants. But talking about them, I thought it was really interesting that I was reading a couple weeks back about mega herbivores through history. And we know that there's lots of dinosaurs that were herbivores, and those are serious mega herbivores. I mean, they were moving through landscapes, changing them constantly. And while I talk about this, I want you to think about the mega herbivores that we're looking at the moment. We're looking at rhinos, we're looking at hippos, looking at elephants, animals that we often consider the landscapers or the architects of these wild environments. And that's because they put so much pressure on the environment. Now, I know pressure kind of has a bad connotation, but pressure is very important because if pressure is not put on something, things are unlikely to change, and life needs to constantly change. Oh, this is a bit philosophical, wasn't it? But I'm talking about actual pressure, like biological pressure. So we attribute these things to these mega herbivores that we see around us, right? And we know that they can change the course of rivers over time. They can change the shapes of groves of trees. Ooh, my goodness, do we have a Cory bustard? This is at Safari Hook, everyone. Well, there goes my mega herbivores rant. I'll keep that in your mind, everybody, for when we go back to seeing one of the big animals. Yeah. Oh, this is amazing. The largest flying bird in Africa. And when we talk about largest, we talk about more like heaviest, but when we say largest, it's particularly important to consider weight because these are birds. And creating lift when you weigh 11 kgs, or even some records, I mean, I can't say if they're proven or not, or anecdotal, but some records even saying like 18, 19 kgs. Creating lift for that amount is huge. It takes so much effort. Go on, pop down. Of course, there are other heavy birds, like ostriches, that could weigh 70 to 100 kgs, but they're not flying, are they? The male Cory bustard might indeed be the heaviest animal that can fly. Oh, how's that? You could see its neck move as it was drinking. You're right, Zygote. The lapwing is upset about something, but knowing lapwings, they're often upset at anything, particularly anybody else who is at the waterhole that is bigger than them. Luckily, they have the attitude that can size up to any creature, really. It doesn't have to be a particular size. They'll take on any animal. And if you think of a quarry bustard at the edge of the water here, maybe a meter high, even a little more, that's pretty big. Dash, you say good day, everyone. Greetings from the Netherlands. You're ready with tea and a raisin bun. Now that is traditional, and I like it. I wonder what the temperature is here in Safari Hook, because you might be able to see slight movement there by the neck. I'm actually wondering if that is slight movement by the neck, or is it just a bit of a camera glitch? Because the mouth is slightly open. Oh, yeah, it looks like it was giving a bit of a flutter. The mouth was slightly open. There we go, opened up again. So it must be pretty hot. Ah, there we go. Kirst says it's 35 degrees Celsius. That is pretty hot. A lot of the time when we see animals opening up their mouth or rather birds and reptiles more than anybody else, and we talk about gula fluttering, we can only tell that's happening by the opening of the mouth. But occasionally, in some species, and maybe even some individuals in the right circumstances, you can actually see the movement in the neck. And I think that's what we were seeing there. All of that flesh in your mouth and your throat and your neck, and this Cory bustard's throat and neck, and those of that of crocodiles, it's all nice and fleshy and damp, wet. And that's great if you want to cool down. And if you can flutter those areas, which, I mean, you can move those areas as well if you tried really hard. I'm just trying right now. But there is a way to kind of like move those areas. However, we can't flutter it because we have not developed the right kind of muscles and maybe even the right kind of movements to be able to create a breeze going in that area, which is exactly what Gula fluttering is doing. It's creating a nice breeze, and that breeze moving over the moist surface means that those moist areas are going to start to evaporate, and by evaporating, they're pulling moisture. Pulling heat, because you need to, reach a certain temperature to pull heat. Now, I don't think this Cory bustard is done yet. I find it, and I see this with birds all the time. Um, Obviously, they put their beaks down into the water and then they lift it up to sort of scoop with their bottom mandible, and then kind of like scoop and dip it into their mouths. But sometimes they even look like they're drinking, in the sense that they look like this, like they're sucking up like we would drink out of our hands at a river. But I can't imagine how that would be possible for them. Unless the movement of the tongue is actually just pulling water into that bottom jaw, as opposed to actually sucking water in to the throat. Now, I also think that this Cory bustard is being very cautious at the waterhole. And I know many birds that are. I know many birds that are quite nervous at a waterhole, but they move so quickly. They get up, well, they don't get up, they just dart off, especially flying, like small birds, like, oh, of course, I said flying birds as if, anyway, you get me. Um, like waxbills and petilias, they often hang out together as well as with firefinches. They, maybe even sparrows and what is the word I'm looking for? Canaries. They tend to like hang out together at waterholes, and they will be quite skittish. Like you've got to be already parked there and waiting. But if you know there's a spot they go to, this is quite a fruitful endeavor. But if you drive in, they will move straight away. So you don't see them, if you're parked there and you watch them, you don't see them behaving anxiously. But they are hyper alert. And then they move as soon as you come through. So maybe that's why this Cory bustard is being very alert and very anxious in the way that you would see a giraffe at a waterhole, because it is so heavy. It is difficult to just suddenly create lift and move off. So it has to compensate by being extra cautious. What an awesome find. What a great way to start. Oh, I say start, but we're already 20 minutes in. Anyway, speaking of anxious animals at a waterhole, let's go to Finch Hattons, which I haven't been to yet, and have a look at a giraffe. They look quite similar to this, actually, if you've not seen a giraffe. I think they look similar, everybody. Well, I guess giraffes are another type of mega herbivore, if I'm being honest. They are mega and they are herbivorous. So with those in mind, those herbivores that we were talking about, I'd like to tell you about mega herbivore dinosaurs that moved through the landscape in ancient times, or not even ancient times, long, long, long time ago. And the relationship it has with growth in trees, particularly those trees that flower. So plants that flower, we call them angiosperms. This is a very broad category. And plants that flower give rise to fruits, right? So I found this really interesting relationship between the presence of mega herbivores and the presence of fruit. So as you can imagine, as giraffes and elephants move through the landscape, they're disturbing a lot of trees, a lot of grasses, small plants, shrubs, bushes. They're disturbing those things. So over time, plants need to adapt. So the environment, or things that live in an environment, the living things, so not the rocks and water and things like that, but the living things are constantly having to adapt to their changing environment. And for the plants that existed with the dinosaurs, they had to change and adapt to the constant movement of large herbivores through a landscape. So that means that they'd be trampled on quite a lot, branches would be broken. If they had fruit growing on them, they would fall out very quickly. So they switched to a strategy that allowed them to produce a lot of offspring, so a lot of seeds. Produce a lot of seeds, but in order to produce a lot of seeds, you've got to use a lot of energy, so they made seeds smaller. So they weren't fruit at that time. So small seeds, no outer casing, so no fleshy fruit that animals could eat. And this was important because they needed to get out as many of their seeds as they could before the next mega herbivore comes through. So you can imagine that that changed the landscape. Before that, trees might have been pushing out large flowers and investing in fewer seeds to produce uh, a bigger evolutionary advantage in the sense of being able to form relationships, like symbiotic relationships with other animals, like insects. However, the mega herbivores kind of prevented that, and trees and plants switched over to the next best thing, which is produce a lot of low quality stuff. Just try and hope something sticks. Then, 66 million years ago, the dinosaurs went extinct. Well, particularly the mega herbivores went extinct, or very large dinosaurs. And the mega herbivores, of course, being the category that is the largest of them. So now the environment gets to adapt again. It gets to change. It says, oh, I don't get disturbed as much as I used to. Um, I'm going to invest in fewer seeds that are bigger and can survive for longer. This is a really cool, important part. And I promise this is relevant to giraffes and elephants and rhinos too, because this kind of change is happening at the moment in the wild. But dinosaurs always moving through areas also meant that areas kept opening up. True forests were difficult, where canopies are closed and there's less light. So all these mega herbivores moving through, opening up these areas, you're not getting dark, dank areas. Now that they're gone, oh, trees are taking over. Thick, lush forests. So that means availability of light becomes a problem. So investing in fewer high quality seeds that have a bigger fruit, bigger actual seed component, which means more energy for longer, so they wouldn't have to actually have the sun for too long. They have enough to grow high enough to catch some sun. All of that comes into play. And I love this because it just shows us how intricately intertwined and interwoven every single bit of life on this planet is. Whether you think it's sentient or not, doesn't matter. Everything affects everything else. Now, once those trees started to produce the larger seeds meant that the fleshy outside could attract animals to for dispersal, became bigger, fruits became a thing, and fruits got pretty big, much like many things in the past. But then mega herbivores started to move through again. The ancestors of elephants, giraffes, rhinos, hippos, they were huge. Not as huge as, say, a titanosaur, or a brontosaurus, but still big enough to create impact on the environment. And then seeds became smaller. Again, fruits became smaller, but not as small as they once were. And that's the size that we kind of have today, because it's in between. So when you eat that berry muffin, or that apple, those fruits that you're eating and the way in which they develop, the size that they are, it has arrived at that from millions of years of trying to adapt to changes. And even in the way that we farm, the way that we create hybrids or GMOs, that's also adjusting the environment. It's also, in a way, not exactly natural, but in a way, it's also acting on the environment and a species acting on the environment and then fruit having to change. So now you might ask yourself, well, where are we right now? And is there enough, because compared to everything else, I mean, our mega herbivores are pretty medium, you know. Wouldn't imagine them creating too much of a dent. But they do. There is evidence to suggest that fruits and seeds are getting smaller. Now, it's not a ton of evidence, and it's not across the board, and it's not significant yet. But I think it still shows me that change is still happening, and that mega herbivores really can have an impact, even if they are pretty medium compared to the other ones we've seen patterns with. And if I'm thinking about marulas, I absolutely love marulas. It's my favorite thing about the wet season in the bush is just being able to stop the game drive vehicle and pick up a marula. Now, I don't know if this is like confirmation bias, and probably is a little bit, but I feel like it's been a while since I've seen a proper, nice, big, thick, juicy marula. The small ones are still juicy though, but they're not as big as I remember them. Now, of course, in my, 6, 7 years of guiding, it's probably not a large enough geological time to be seeing these kinds of changes. Um, but I think if we asked somebody who was eating fruits in the bush 100 years ago, they'd probably tell you it was a little bigger. At least I think so. Anyway, that was my interesting thing that I was busy deep diving a couple weeks ago that I wanted to share with you all. Because that's my favorite thing about nature, is how everything is so dependent on everything else. And nothing you look at would be able to exist as it exists if the other things didn't exist. If elephants didn't exist, I wonder if giraffes would look like this. Would they be this tall? Um, would they become shorter because they have access to so much? Who knows? Everything is constantly leaning and pushing and pulling against each other. Jack de Boer, interesting. I'm glad you found it interesting. I am. Sometimes I rant on about these things and I realize that probably not everybody's that interested in it. Some people just want to watch happy animals, which I totally get too. Amber Coe is here. You are waving hello and thank you for today's show. You're watching Tembe today, the Tembe camera with a trumpeting Ellie. And you hoped it might be because the two lionesses with the 5 new cubs are around. Ooh, how interesting. Well, I'm sure that if there is even the slightest chance that they are around, Kirst will let us know and we'll jump straight there. But for now, let's head over to Moella and have a look at one of those big herbivores we were talking about. It's not a brontosaurus, unfortunately, though. Oh, this is nice. What is that on the ground? Does anybody know? My first thought is that it's just footprints. Um, especially at this time of the year, you can see that it's pretty muddy, and it has been very muddy. So maybe it's just footprints. Um, Thousands of them, and they dry up as animals move. But it almost looks like somebody's been dehusking corn all over here. But most likely it's just tracks. Oh, well, if we look close, like very close to us here at the mud, you can see that it's tracks. Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Very angry zebra there. I appreciate that the elephants are not worried about the zebras, because a lot of the time they can get themselves involved in other animals' business for nothing. Oh, never mind. Definitely a bit of irritation happening at the waterhole. That elephant's problem was with another elephant, yes, but this zebra's problem is with other zebras. But this behavior that we're seeing, both from the zebra and from the elephant, I see it a lot in areas where resources are stressed. There might not be something specific that is bothersome to these animals, but they are just irritable. And you see it with elephants a lot. I remember seeing it in Madikwe a couple of years ago when we were coming out of a drought. And there was not, I mean, there was still water because the water holes at the lodges, they get pumped. But for actual food, the quality of the vegetation, everything was dry, dry, dry. And almost dusty, you know? And the elephants actually got moody. Maybe moody is the wrong word. They became very irritable. And they were just not the same as they were, say, a couple months previous to that. Shame. That poor elephant is now walking off in the top left-hand corner of the screen, been pushed away by these four. Another thing that tells me that maybe these animals are a little bit stressed, and remember, stress is not a bad thing. Too much stress, of course, that can be terrible and can take a biological toll on the body. But periods of stress like this, when there is little water, the rains haven't come and replenished things yet. These are natural cycles, and in fact, these are natural cycles for anything that's living. But we have done well to make ourselves comfortable. There we go, a little more space for the zebras. I've been seeing quite a few different individuals kicking and bucking, which I find interesting because I wonder if they're just kind of doing it from seeing others, or whether they're actually irritable themselves. I wonder what the temperature, I mean, since Kirsty's been so good with giving me temperatures today, I wonder if you could tell me what the temperature is here at Moella. The elephants don't look like they're crazy hot, but the behavior of the zebras is throwing me a little bit. They seem very desperate. And it's only going to get worse when this giraffe that's approaching comes to this spot as well. 37 degrees Celsius. That is warm. Oh, thank you, everybody. I'm glad you enjoyed that little discussion. Montenegro, you'd like to know when do the rains begin here? I mean, they should be coming along very soon. The first rains for us in southern Africa, I mean, not every single spot there are to this, but the first rains usually come around now. We've had ours in Johannesburg. If you joined us for Wild Moments on Thursday, Taylor was telling us that she's had hers up in the Lowveld, which is just basically north from here. So it's meant to be around now. And I find it astonishing, Montenegro, how somehow, now obviously there's drought years, but somehow that like patches of water, they still remain until the first rains come. It's as if they're just holding on, as if they know to just hold on a few more weeks because the rains are coming. So I would say, I mean, basically any time now, Montenegro, any time now, that water is going to come through. And you can see how much this landscape needs it. Now, in general, this is not an area that is going to get a ton of rain. It's not gonna ever look like a lush forest. But you can see that this plain sand, it looks like nothing's even growing there. It looks like nothing's been dried. Like there's not even a dried plant, it's just flat. There's a couple reasons that's happening. One, in the dry season, there's only a few, so all those ephemeral pans, those seasonal pans that animals can stop at any time, they tend to dry up quickly. And then these more stable pans, they become a hub of movement. So I know this is a weird example, but there's that maybe this one spot of carpet in your house where, especially if it's near a door, that gets flattened more than the rest because there's constant movement, always a thoroughfare. It's kind of the same here for this ground. Animals have been moving through to and from this waterhole so often that the ground really hasn't had time to recover. Now, when other little pans open up, this waterhole won't become the main hub and the main source of water. They can get it anyway. So then that footprint sort of eases up. But even though it may look desolate and absolutely dry, you can see trees in the distance. And if you were there on the ground, you would still see tiny, insignificant looking growth. But that growth have significant root systems. And once the rains come, bit of noise here. Once the rains come, it gives the opportunity for a lot of growth. And I can't wait to see the transformation, honestly, because this area looks a lot like an area I was recently in Tanzania. And it looked like nothing will ever grow there. And it does. Once the rain comes, the landscape changes. So I can't wait to see what it looks like here. And also remember, these animals coming through, look at these zebras. Can you imagine the seeds stuck underneath their hooves? The elephants with the grooves and wrinkles underneath their feet, those cracks on their heels. All the seeds stuck in there, all the seeds in their dung. And moving to and from the waterhole, they're dropping that on this seemingly empty landscape. Once those rains come, it's a huge opportunity to unleash that energy that's locked in the seed. quite literally energy. I'd really like to keep an eye on this one. We're going to head over to Tau and have a look at a yellow-billed stork. Maybe, maybe some new cubs come popping their heads out. Amberco, what do you say? I see storks. I don't see 5 little cubs, unfortunately, Amberco, but that's okay. Maybe they will come. This is what I think Tau used to look like when it was an average, just an average wet season. This is what it used to look like. And remember that one year, I think it was last year. And we had those huge rains, and Tau absolutely transformed. There's so much potential in a landscape. And oftentimes I think that things have to get so perfect. You know, there's got to be more than 8 hours of sunlight and more than this much humidity and moisture. I mean, if you think about your house plants, you know, one little thing goes wrong and suddenly they want to die. Sometimes it feels like things have to be so precise for life to happen. But in actual fact, there is a huge buffer. Things don't have to be perfect, they just have to be enough. And at Tau, where we are now, that year, when those additional rains came and really soaked in the ground, I mean, this waterhole was huge. But more than that, all the vegetation in the back was absolutely green. And we were seeing soil on the backs of the elephants coming from, like, so Tau is in the north of Madikwe, and then the red soils, that iron oxide rich soil, is way back, like down on the south, to the south, and even to the east. But we were seeing those soils being brought up. It was as if, I don't know, life had returned to Tau. But nothing changed except that one resource became hugely abundant. And that can change things. Jean Gale, you say you're watching with your 90-year-old relative and he taught history of science and he really enjoyed the megafauna discussion. I'm very glad. I am glad. Some of my most influential people in my life have been my science teachers. I have been so lucky to have amazing biology teachers, amazing chemistry teachers. I've had average physics teachers, but it was still good. But the people who have taught me science have been excited about it. And that shows. And they've been endlessly curious. And I love that. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for putting up with my little bit of a deep dive. I mean, who else am I going to share these things with, people? Who else? My family would look at me and then groan. So I have to share it with my wildlife family, which is all of you. So until next time, thank you very much for joining us. I'll be doing some more reading and all of that. I hope that you are feeling super relaxed like I am and that you head into your day full of life. Thank you for your questions and your comments. See you on Thursday for Wild Moments. Bye, everybody.